Hey everybody, it's Joe Artist Horn. Today I'm going to ask you a question that I really want to hear from you in regards to, but before I get to that, I want to show you some of my most prized possessions. These things are absolutely priceless. I would not sell them for any amount of money in the world, and I'll explain to you very briefly in each case why that is. So come on over. And again, in just a minute, I'm going to ask you a question that I want to hear from you in regards to. But we start with a chair that I sat in. My earliest memories go back to probably 5 years of age. This belonged to Virginia Leuenberger, my father's mother. We called her Grandma Goody. My first memory of Grandma Goody, I was about 4, and I walked in to meet her, and she was standing in front of her freezer like this. I walked in and she said, "You can call me Grandma Goody." And out she reveals Otter Pops, fresh from the freezer, to me and my siblings. Huge first impression. What 4-year-old doesn't want an Otter Pop? And I believe mine was blue. So whatever fruit of the forest blue is pretending to have something to do with, I got a blue one. But I remember sitting at every family gathering for probably 30 plus years before she finally passed away. My grandpa Charlie, my father, my mother, my cousins Shannon, all of my cousins and siblings. This chair, each one of the grandkids, cousins, and siblings contributed to picking at it. Now, I don't know how old this chair is, but it originally came with 3 others and a kitchen table in that very 1950s and 60s kitchen orange that everything used to be in. I ended up with this chair before my grandmother passed. She asked me, "Is there anything in my house that you would ever want?" This was all I asked for. Up next, I'm going to save probably my most valued possession for last. But let me show you a very close runner-up. In approximately 1987, my parents bought me this Harmony electric guitar used from a guy that had played it for years doing clubs in Portland, Oregon as a local blues/jazz musician. And so the belt buckle rash is a mixture of his and mine. But I was 9 years old when I got this guitar from my parents. It survived a house burglary where they took almost all of our Christmas presents the year that I got this. And if you look closely, you can see that it's endured a lot of fire damage. The long story short is, in 2010, my parents had a full loss house fire. This was actually in my parents' closet. And at first we couldn't find it because it was buried all the way up to here in ash. And it was one of the only things that was recovered right before bulldozers came to level the place and clean up the land. So this survived a house burglary, a house fire, me having sold it when I was like 12 and then getting it back later when I was in my 20s, and will always have a very special place in my heart as my very first electric guitar. And while we're here on this planet, in terms of stuff that you can't take with you into the next life, again, it's all finite. It's not more important to me than people. But of stuff, this is probably the most priceless thing that I own. And it is a 2005 original print of the Ahriman Gate. So it's fact-based fiction. And I, as well as a lot of the people that read it at the time, believed it was amazing. And it really stood up against Tim LaHaye and Ted Decker and the people that write in that style of book writing. Be it secular or Christian. We just thought it competed very well. But after he was done with it, he did the one. He's like, no, I'm going to stick with traditional theological, eschatological, biblical Bible studies and prophetic works. And that's what the rest of his professional ministerial career basically consisted of. But here's one of the reasons, and probably the de facto reason, why this book means the world to me. To my perfect son, keep thinking for yourself, Dad. If it ever burns down, I'll never be able to replace it. And finally, as I mentioned minutes ago, the need to hear from you. This is something I started kind of teasing in one of the SkyWatch television broadcasts, but I thought we could do a fun internet poll just to see if this is something that would appeal to you, and not just in terms of platitudes and that would be nice isms, but actually meat on the bone. Would you listen to these? Because I think a lot of people think it's a nice idea, but it does represent over 200, somewhere between 200 and 300 of my father's original pastoral cassette tapes that range from the 1970s up through to the late 90s. And a few of them in the very early 2000s when he was just beginning a lot of his more visible ministerial career, when he was doing Art Bell and George Norrie and people at Coast to Coast AM. And a lot of these are his radio tours, the whole series on spiritual warfare, how to succeed as a Christian. One of his best of all times, the State of the Union address. And you guys might remember these if you ever went to conferences or church events where this was kind of the pre-internet. This was kind of the way that ministers would travel and speak. And they would make their series available in audio cassette. So you might be wondering, how would you listen to all of these many hours of pastoral sermons and radio broadcasts by the legendary Dr. Thomas R. Horn? Well, don't be afraid. We're not going to ask you to pull out your 1975 tape cassette player here, although they have started remanufacturing them because cassette tapes are coming back for whatever reason. But last year, I spent probably 4 months digitally archiving them, and I had to play each one in a cassette player and make a digital file in real time. It was the only way to get the information off the cassette. There's no way to pop a cassette into anything digital and have it read the tape. You have to actually play it, creates a sound file. And then I took it and I compressed it. I cleaned up the audio. So the file, as opposed to the original audio that's very dated and tends to be really loud in volume at times and then very soft at times as maybe someone would step away from the mic. It had all of these variations in audio. They're all smooth now, almost like a podcast. In fact, I will show you just a sample of what kind of fire is on these tapes in just a second, so you can hear it for yourself. But while I was archiving those, it was also going through my mind that at some point, many of you might want the entire vault in MP3 form. So we're talking now about the potential of a data library, maybe a flash drive or a master data DVD library, something like that that would give you access to the many years of his pastoral career / ministry, which I am telling you, sounds biased because I'm the son, but these hold up over time as if you're listening to podcasts that are happening right now, because that's how far ahead of time my father actually was. He was talking about transhumanism in the late 70s. He was talking about where all these cultural trends in terms of politics. He was warning people of a totalitarian government that was basically frameworked to appear like the process of voting. And he was prophesying that it would happen in less than 50 years from the time that he was talking about this 35 to 40 years ago. So let me show you just a sample of the kind of heat that's on these cassettes. If you were wondering in terms of prophetic timing, where my dad's head was 30 years ago and what you might be experiencing now in the political climate, here is just a less than 1 minute clip of what he was saying out loud. And ask yourself if this sounds like politics that are unfolding right now.
It's in the hands of men and women just like you and I. And folks, I'm going to tell you something, and you hear me, because this is a prophecy. If America does not wake up and teach its children to read, and teach its children to write, and teach its children to think, but most especially teach its children to pray and to honor God, we will have a dictator in this country in less than 50 years. I prophesy it will come to pass. I'm a student of history, and I see the progress that we're making towards dictatorship here in the United States of America. If you want a great America, be a great person. But if you want a godly America, then be a godly person. And when the doors to God's house is open on Sunday, get in here. Because when you come in here, it is a vote for responsibility and righteousness to rule in America. It says God is number one in my life. He's not my last hope.
My dad was a part of that giant movement, in particular the 70s and 80s, the big tent revivals. And you would have, 1,000 people, 1,500, 2,500 people jammed into what looked like a carnival tent with one massive PV speaker, 1,000-watt solid state. You would be deaf if you were in the front row, and in the back row you'd be doing like this, right? Or sometimes if it was really sophisticated, they'd have two speakers kind of strung about in a chain so that the back of the tent also had access to audio. But here's the point. He's talking about if you want a great America, be a great person. If you want a godly America, be a godly person. And is that something you've heard recently? The whole dichotomy about how to get America back on track, and if you really want it to be great, where your focus should be. There is, again, almost 200 to 300 hours of this type of fire, and it's timely, and it's just as alive today as it was then. So I'm just going to read to you just a few of the sermon series titles and the names of the sermons so that you can get a taste of what my dad was talking about. He's got Adam Before the Fall, which is a multi-part, 7 or 8 part series. This was one of his big ones. He's got Revival coming. He's got the book of Revelation ciphered. He's got The Name Above All Names from Cornerstone Assembly of God back in the 70s. Awake, O Sleeper, the lamp's now out. The Mistake of Freudian Psychology. The Logos and the Rhema. These were not your usual Sunday morning sermons, folks. The Enthusiasm of God, The Thirst of Nature, The Blood, An Offense to Man, Show Me Thy Glory, The Spirit of Accusation, A Spirit of Power, Love, Sound, Mind, Sir, We Would See Jesus, I Double Dare You. So many classics, so many hours. So is this collection something that you would want in terms of having the entire volume in some format or another? Leave your comments and we'll be paying attention to your reaction to this video. So digging through the archives, I found my very first ever voiceover to any book. I want to say this was 2006. This is me really doing the best I can to bring kind of the monster truck guy to what was my dad's first ever book trailer. Are you ready? The Ahriman Gate. It's pretty bad. I'm just warning you.
5-star reviews. To order your copy of the Ahriman Gate and for a limited time receive a free gift with every purchase, log on to RaidersNewsUpdate.com. That's www.RaidersNewsUpdate.com. The Ahriman Gate. Some gates should not be opened.
The audio was absolutely horrendous. I had no idea what I was doing with track layering or anything. I actually think I exported the voiceover separately and then just added it to a backing track. So there wasn't even like separate compression. It was a total disaster. But my sweet dad wanted a voiceover, and I threw my efforts at trying to deliver one for him. You can tell, I don't know how much you can tell from this video watching it under these conditions, but by the time I did Nephilim Stargates from 2008, I had made some stride in the quality of my ability to capture vocal audio. So here's a throwback to that original.
Invaded and destroyed. Now, exclusively at RaidersNewsNetwork.com, we'll tell you what you need to know about them in the book-length ebook, Nephilim Stargates and the Return of the Watchers.
So these trailers never had visual. There was no video. They weren't on YouTube. I don't even know that we knew what YouTube was yet. But no, these were back during the Raiders Live news radio update. And also occasionally my father would buy paid for advertisement on other people's podcasts and radio shows. And so That's where these existed, audio only.